Welcome to the Gospel Chariot podcast with Greg Smith. Join me for theological ramblings, thoughts, Bible classes, sermons, and an occasional guest. If you're searching for a confident relationship with God, if you're seeking clarity in your eternal purpose, you have found the right podcast. Let's open God's Word and hear His message. And may the Holy Spirit direct my words and enrich your hearing. I want to start a series this morning looking at some of the Old Testament prophets, actually looking at all of the Old Testament prophets, just not all in one sermon. And I want you to know, and I want you to see how the message of Jesus is in some ways very similar or the same message that God sent through the Old Testament prophets. And this morning, we'll be looking at Isaiah. So when you look at Isaiah, it's like one gospel that burns through the ages. And really to understand that, I want you to get just a quick glimpse of Isaiah's world. Isaiah lived in a world that was trembling, much like our world, to be honest with you. Assyria is pressing in like a storm cloud from the north. Its army marches forth. In Isaiah's day, they would say it was like locusts. It was swallowing kingdoms in its path. It was conquering nations and cities and peoples and putting them into prison and into slavery. Outside of Assyria on the horizon, you had Babylon, and Babylon was starting to come to power. And as Babylon started to come to power, it was promising that it was going to come with the same type of exile and humiliation. And God's people are caught right in the middle. Their cities are vulnerable. They know they can be attacked. Their leaders are corrupt. As a people, they're confused, they're afraid, they're disoriented, and their hearts are cracking with the question, where is God? And what is going to become of us? And who is going to save us? And in that, Isaiah comes with his prophecies. Now later, centuries later, when Jesus steps into the world, I want you to know that the same ache still remains. Rome had taken Babylon's place. They had a tax system that drained almost every household. Soldiers roamed the streets and kept peace with the edge of the sword. People of Israel are longing for freedom. They're whispering of a revolution, of the day that they're going to cast off the burden that Rome has put on them. They read Isaiah by candlelight, and they dream of a Messiah who is going to come, overthrow Rome, overthrow Caesar, and restore David's throne. And they just hope in these passages that are in Isaiah about God's day of judgment, the day there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And Jesus shows up, and he doesn't show up with spears and chariots and soldiers. It's parables and lessons spoke from a fishing boat, and a small band of followers on dusty roads. And it's about cleansing lepers and forgiving sin and turning the other cheek, and something about a cross and death. And it was totally misunderstood because it was about rejection and suffering and crucifixion. And centuries later, the ache is still there. Jesus has died. He's resurrected. He's gone up to heaven. And still the church is facing the same issues. They're hunted. They're humiliated. They're tracked down. They're burned as torches in Nero's garden. They're thrown to the beast in Roman arenas. John, one of the last of the apostles, is exiled to the island of Patmos where he writes the book of Revelation. And in all of that, people are still asking, where is God and what is He doing? What does God do when the nations rage and they fight against each other? And where is God when the ache of the world just doesn't seem to end? And we sit in our world and we see the same thing, don't we? We see nations flex their military muscle. We see one nation try to take control of another nation. We look into the world and we see injustice, and we see people being taken advantage of, and we see people not being cared for, and it looks loud and violent and uncertain, and we're at odds with the world, and we sit here asking the same question, where's God and what's He doing? And the people in Isaiah's day misunderstood the message, and if we're not careful, we'll misunderstand the same message, because the message very simply is that God is writing redemption through the ache of the world. He's not hiding behind it. He's not absent from the ache. God is moving in the ache, and He's moving in the way in an ache that He is painting the picture of His kingdom. So it's almost like Isaiah was a line drawing in black and white, and Jesus comes along and Jesus starts painting in color. Because God's rescue and His new creation produces a rescue that we don't expect. We have this idea of exactly how we think God is supposed to rescue the world, but God doesn't always rescue the world the way that we think He's supposed to rescue the world. Isaiah's people stood there and they're longing for this deliverance. They're wanting something new. They're wanting this rescue, and they picture it through this lens of domination. What's going to happen is Israel is going to rise up, and it's going to overcome, it's going to overthrow, it's going to overpower all of its enemies. There's a king coming who's going to crush the nations. But Isaiah comes along, and he's preaching something different. He's saying things like, behold, I create a new heaven and a new earth. Or the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The young child shall put his hand in a snake's nest, a viper's nest. And we're thinking, what in the world is Isaiah trying to say? It's not conquest, it's this renewal. And it's so deep, it just kind of reshapes everything that we think about the world, everything that we see in the world. And centuries later, Jesus steps in and He starts talking about the same kind of renewal. It's going to be a new creation. You're going to be a new creation. A time is coming when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God and come out of the grave. So He speaks of resurrection and restoration. And it's not the message they were looking for. The message they were looking for was a Messiah who would come and destroy Rome. Jesus shows up as the Messiah with no intent of overthrowing Rome. They wanted comfort. And Jesus comes talking about crosses and humiliation. They want domination. They want somebody who will rule. And Jesus comes along with a towel and a basin, and He starts washing people's feet. And the message is the same in Isaiah and Jesus, because salvation comes through sacrifice, not power. What we're wanting, or what we think we want, is we want this kingdom that's going to show up, and all of a sudden when this kingdom shows up, God's going to step in a way that He is just going to destroy everything that stands against us. And it's not really working that way. It's not about who's the strongest. It's about who makes the greatest sacrifice. It comes down to blood that's shed. Words of Jesus when He says, it's the kind of love that lays down His life for His friend. That's why the wolf lies down with the lamb. It's a new creation. And He doesn't teach just about kingdom, He kind of launches that kingdom. So we find ourselves standing kind of between two dawns, two sunrises. You know, the light's broken. We know that Jesus is real. We're waiting for Him to come and set the world straight, and we're looking for that renewal. We're looking for that day when bodies rise out of the grave and when we dry our tears. We're waiting for that new creation where He breathes new light into us. And as Isaiah paints this, and as Jesus paints this, they talk about it in terms of the day of the Lord. Now, when we start reading about the day of the Lord, we think things like, oh boy, that's the day God's going to set things straight, isn't it? That's the day God's going to show up in judgment. And there is a judgment about that. There is a day when Jesus shows up and He changes the injustice of the world. But when you're thinking about the day of the Lord, I want you to think it in terms of this. Before something new is born, something old has to die. Before the world can be made whole, you have to look at the world and figure out what's making the world sick. You have to figure out what the disease is. And Isaiah understood that. So when he comes, his vision's not naive, it's not soft, it's not full of sentiment, it's fire. He says things like, God's going to have a day that he stands up against everything that's proud and lofty. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near, as destruction from the Almighty it will come. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with wrath and fierce anger. So it's not, when you're thinking day of the Lord, you're not thinking a 24-hour period, okay? It's not just about, there's a 24-hour period when God's going to show up and he's going to do some big things. No, it's the day that God comes in judgment. It's not about the period of time. It is about the divine interruption that comes into the world. And why did Isaiah have to say those kind of things? Because the light of God's message was beginning to show up all the darkness of the world. They were going to the temple. They were making their sacrifices. They were saying they believed in God. But Isaiah doesn't come with this reform. He comes announcing judgment. So Jesus shows up in the world, and Jesus, he's announcing judgment too, isn't he? Be more bearable in Sodom and Gomorrah on that day. Wow. I mean, if it's going to be more bearable in Sodom and Gomorrah, you remember that story, don't you? Like all the fire came down from heaven and destroyed them. So what did they do? What did they do that made it so bad? Well, first they rejected the Messiah. So he sharpens that day. He stands, and here's the thing, he stands in the middle of all of that injustice of the world, and judgment's not only coming, it's already begun. The light is already coming in the world. So the day of the Lord is about what begins, not just what ends. And if you look out in our world, what do you see? What do you see? Here's what Isaiah and Jesus both saw in their world. They saw a world that determined religion and religious sincerity by what happened on the outside. Now, that's very normal, very natural for us to do. Because here's the reality about human beings. You know what I can see? The outside. Can't see the inside. I can't see what's in your heart. I can't see your motivation. I can't see your purpose. I don't know what makes you run, so to speak. Boy, we could just use me as an example, couldn't we? You say, well, I'm going to give myself all good qualities. Is that okay with y'all? Greg, he's going to try to help somebody when they need help. You know what you can't see? You can't see if I'm really trying to help somebody when they need help, or if I'm just doing it reluctantly because I know I have to do that to get a paycheck. And you can't tell because you can't see my heart. Isaiah looks at his world, and everything in their world, it looks like they're doing right. God said to go offer sacrifices. You know what they were doing? They're offering sacrifices. God said you need to have certain fast days. You know what they were doing? They were having certain fast days. Now, they were doing some of it a little incorrectly, but they were doing the religious things. Do you know what they were not doing? They weren't taking care of the poor. They were not taking care of widows. They weren't taking care of orphans. Those who hired other people were hiring other people, but they weren't paying them a fair wage. Those who had money were oppressing people who didn't have money. And they weren't reflecting the heart of God in the way that they dealt with one another. There was social injustice and injustice going on in the world. So when God, through Isaiah, looks down into that world, what does he say about the religious feast that they were keeping? Do you remember? I hate them. I hate them. Why? We're not doing it on the right day. Oh, you got the day. Oh, we got the wrong sacrifice. No, most of the time they had the right sacrifice, although sometimes instead of bringing the best, do you remember what they would do? Bring the one that disease doesn't have any value. You bring that and give that to God. But it was the injustice of the world. He's looking at them thinking, you need to be different from the inside out. It's not about how you look on the outside. It's how you look on the inside that matters. So Jesus comes along, and Jesus says almost the same thing that Isaiah says, because what does he say? What does he say to the Pharisees? Oh, boy, you look like a clean cup on the outside. Have you ever gone somewhere and you're visiting somebody's house, or maybe you're somewhere else, or maybe you're at a restaurant and they bring out a coffee cup, and man, it looks all pretty and nice and clean, and they ask if you want a cup of coffee, so they hand you a coffee cup, and and they hand it to you, and you look down in it right before they start to pour something in it, and you look down in it, and it's like got a ring where it was used the last time. How many of you find a reason not to drink out of that cup? Oh, I just thought I wanted some coffee. It's awful hot in here. I don't believe I need any of that. Coffee keeps me up late at night. I don't think I'll drink today. What's wrong with it? What did it look like on the outside? I mean, have you ever done that at your house? You start to empty the dishwasher, right? And you start to empty the dishwasher, and it looks all good, and you're starting to put it up. You put it up in there, and you look inside of one of the cups, and it's like, or you look at a fork, and it's like, I don't know what you put on that fork, probably peanut butter. But you put that on, and it's like, didn't quite get clean on that one, did it? So what do we do with it? We put it in there, or do we wash it and get it clean? Well, you're supposed to wash it and get it clean. I hope that's what you do. Why does Jesus use that terminology? Because we can relate to it. God's not concerned about what the outside of the cup looks like. He wants to know what the heart looks like. So Jesus comes along and he says something like, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, because he's looking for transformation. See, so there's like one gospel and one voice in Isaiah and the same voice in Jesus. Man, Isaiah, I don't think ever met Jesus in the flesh, but their words harmonize, and their words are the same. One speaks from the ruins of Jerusalem, the other walk the rebuilt streets of Jerusalem, and in both of them they see a vision of a future that started, but it's not yet born, and it's that God's not impressed with appearances. God's not silent when suffering happens in the world. God is not going to be slow with justice, and God is not finished with creation. He's still moving in the world. Even in the ache and the hurt and the heartbreak, even in the apprehension, even in the wondering, even in the questionings, are these the last days or the first days, or what is God doing, or when is God going to move, or when is God going to bring judgment on the world? And Isaiah brings that word into the world, and Jesus even expands that word in the world, and it's still the word that we hear today. It's still the same God who spoke through Isaiah, the same God who came in the flesh in Jesus, and the same God who dwells in our world. So what do you do with all of that? What do you do with this message of Isaiah and this message of Jesus? Well, I think there are just 5 practical things, okay? Number 1, you clean the cup from the inside. Stop managing your appearance. Stop managing everything by the way it looks on the outside. Just ask God if He would examine your heart. You don't do things to serve God for attention. You do them to align yourself with His will. You pray not so somebody else will hear you. You pray so that God will shape you by His Spirit. That prayer of David to create in me a clean heart. That's the first step. God is looking for clean hearts. The second thing is you don't stay silent when vulnerable people need help. Isaiah is very clear in that in his message, and I think Jesus is very clear in his as well. We speak out against injustice. When those that can't care for themselves are trampled or the powerful mock God's name, we let righteousness shape everything about our life, whether it's what we think, our spending, our relationships. We learn to do good, we seek justice, and we seek righteousness. We seek to reach out to people who need to be reached out to. James says it really clear, doesn't he? He says, pure religion is to care for the orphans and the widows. When God comes along in the Old Testament, why did he tell them not to harvest the very edges of the field? It's for the widows and the orphans so they could be taken care of, so that those who did not have as much could be cared for. And that's part of our responsibility of the church, is help care for people who need help. We long for the right kind of rescue. And what I mean by this is sometimes we confuse comfort with salvation. Stop looking for God to fix the world with power and start understanding that God's going to conform the world through a cross. That's how God works. It's how he's worked all the way through the ages. We don't trust in weapons. You remember even Isaiah, we'll talk about Jeremiah next week, and the same thing happened in Jeremiah. When Assyria and Babylon started pressing in, do you know one of the things that Israel decided they needed to do? We'll go get Egypt to help. We'll go get Egypt. Egypt will save us. And God's all the time saying, Egypt's not going to save you. What was going to save them? Their God. Their God was going to save them if they would just follow him. But even sometimes when we look at rescue, we need to remember the kind of rescue that we're looking for. Jesus came in the world to bring rescue. How did he do it? Through a cross. Through a cross. Went the wrong way. Live as a citizen of what is and what is coming. It's a good question when somebody asks me, what am I supposed to do right now? What are you supposed to do right now? Now, let's just take a poll. How many of you know exactly when Jesus is coming? How many of you know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow? How many of you know if you're even going to live until tomorrow? How many of you know this is not your last day on the earth? I'm not trying to be morbid, so don't break out in tears or anything. We don't know. We have no idea. So the only thing we can do in the moment is we can live as a citizen of what is. Now, what is in the moment is you are a citizen of God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is much greater than any other kingdom that's ever going to exist. What's coming? Well, there's a day of judgment coming. There's that day of the Lord. There's the day when Jesus shows up in the cloud, the day when it's all over, the earth's burned up like a fire, and the only thing that's left is your relationship with God. That'll be all that's left. You live as a citizen of that. You understand your purpose in the moment. So we serve and we forgive and we live in the kingdom because we're part of the kingdom. And then we stay awake. I think I missed a slide in there. We stay awake for the day of the Lord. I don't know why my parents came up with the name for me that they came up for me. I have no idea where Gregory came from. I'd ask Dad, but he didn't have a clue. And I doubt Mom even knows. I don't know why they named me Gregory instead of Bob or George or something. But I'm not. I'm Gregory. I think it was probably because, I don't really know. I'm not even going to go there. I'm in some ways kind of thankful for it. Do you know that the word Gregory comes from the Greek word gegoreo, which means to stay awake or be vigilant. So when Paul writes, stay awake, that's where my name comes from. I'm supposed to stay awake, right? Maybe they gave me that name because I wouldn't sleep. Maybe they gave me, maybe I was like Bob until I didn't sleep for the first 4 or 5 months, and they changed my name to staying awake. I don't know. Stay awake. What does it mean to stay awake? You're alert. You know what it means when we say somebody's supposed to have their head on a swivel? How many of you, when you were driving, were told you're supposed to have your head on a swivel? That's probably old terminology. None of y'all got that, did you? I was told to keep your head on a swivel. So when I'm driving, I have a routine. And if you ever ride with me, you'll see it. Look here, mirror, mirror, rear view mirror, straight ahead, mirror, mirror, rear view mirror. And so I'm always checking my mirrors. I don't want anybody to get in my blind spot. When somebody gets in my blind spot and rides in my blind spot, hot babe, what happens? I get ill. I don't want you in my blind spot. And I'll just be honest, 9 times out of 10, I will not slow down to let you get out of my blind spot. 9 times out of 10, it has something to do with the accelerator going toward the floor, right? But I am not going to let you stay in my blind spot because I can't see you. And if I can't see you, I might forget that you're there. Have you ever been driving down the road and you glance in your rearview mirror and you see a motorcycle? And you glance in your rearview mirror again and the motorcycle's gone because he's already here because he's like moving, right? And it doesn't have to be a motorcycle. Sometimes it's a car. Why are you watching? Why do you keep your head on a swivel? So you know where everybody is at every particular time so you don't hit somebody who's in your blind spot or nobody comes up and takes you by surprise. And all I would say to you as a believer in Jesus, why don't you just go through life with your head on a swivel? Be watching. Be awake. Be expecting. And here's the key. Be expecting for Jesus to come back. How many decisions would you make differently if you expected Jesus today? Today. You're expecting him to be here today. That's why he said to be awake and to be alert and to be aware of the kingdom. Isaiah comes into the world and it's just, people are wringing their hands saying, man, what is just, our world has never been this bad and I just have no idea what's going to happen with it. And he said, it's because God's going to bring something new. But he's not going to bring something new through power. He's going to bring something new through sacrifice. Jesus comes along and people are wringing their hands thinking, what in the world are we going to do? The world's never been this bad. And Jesus says, oh, just be patient. God's bringing something new, but he's not bringing something new through power. He's bringing something new through sacrifice, which is why Jesus came into the world. So Jesus comes and he ascends into heaven. The first century church, they're being bombarded on every side and persecuted and made fun of and ridiculed. Their possessions are being confiscated and they're wringing their hands thinking, what are we going to do? The world's never been this bad before. And God says, come, I'm bringing something new, which is the book of Revelation, right? Written to comfort those who are going through the turmoil and the pain and the suffering and the confiscation. And God says, just be patient. I'm doing something different. I'm bringing something new. And we get into our world and we are doing the same thing. We're wringing our hands, looking at the world, thinking, man, what's going to happen to the world? The world's never been this bad. Israel's attacking Iran. Iran's attacking Israel. We're attacking Iran. And you got this war going over here. We got Russia and we got Ukraine. And we got injustice in the world. We got politicians making laws that doesn't seem like it's good for the good of the people. And then we got some politicians doing this and some doing that. And it's not a political statement at all, okay? It's just the world that we live in. And God in all of that says, be patient. I'm doing something new, but I'm not doing it through power. I'm doing it through sacrifice. So Jesus' message, Isaiah's message, the same message. Can you find trust and hope in the God who made it all and let God in his time and in his way continue to bring something new into the world?